Kevin had always been ambitious, and he dreamed of making it big in the business world. He was willing to do whatever it takes to get to the top. After all, he had worked hard in school, got his degree, and landed a job at a prestigious firm. But he quickly realized that success in the corporate world wasn't just about hard work and talent. It was about playing the game. Kevin's boss, Joseph, was the picture of success. He had a corner office on the 67th floor, expensive shoes, and a dazzling smile. Kevin was envious, but he knew that if he played his cards right, he could get there too. Joseph was always pushing Kevin to do things that made him uncomfortable. But Kevin didn't want to disappoint his boss, so he went along with it anyway. One day, Joseph asked Kevin to do something that made him hesitate. It was a small request, but it made Kevin uneasy. Joseph could see the look on Kevin's face and said, "Come on, Kevin, you want to play the game, don't you?" Kevin hesitated, but ultimately agreed. It was just one small step in playing the game, right? But as time went on, the requests became more and more questionable. Kevin found himself involved in insider trading, covering up scandals, and even physically harming others. He tried to ignore the sick feeling in his stomach, telling himself that this was just how things were done in the business world. He was playing the game after all, but when he and his colleague Theodore killed their boss Hank and a homeless woman in an alleyway, Kevin realized that he had gone too far. Theodore tried to reassure him, telling him that this was just how things were done and that they would be taken care of if they kept playing the game. But Kevin couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. As he helped Theodore dispose of the bodies, Kevin made a decision. He would no longer play the game. He would turn himself in and face the consequences of his actions. But Theodore wouldn't let him leave that easily. "What are you doing, Kevin?" Theodore asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You can't just walk away from this. You're in too deep now." "I can't do this anymore, Theodore," Kevin said, his voice shaking. "I have to turn myself in. I have to make things right." "You can't just walk away from this," Theodore repeated. "You know too much. You're a liability now." Kevin's heart raced as he realized what Theodore was saying. He was in danger. He had to get out of there before it was too late. As he walked away from the alley, Kevin hoped that he could find a way to make a difference and change the game, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. He had to be careful. He had to watch his back, because in the business world, playing the game could be deadly. Kevin's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan. He knew that he couldn't go to the police. They wouldn't believe him, and he was afraid of what Theodore and the others might do to him. He decided to seek out someone who could help him, someone who had experience dealing with dangerous people. The only person he could think of was his uncle, a retired police detective. As he made his way through the city, Kevin couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He kept glancing over his shoulder, but he didn't see anyone suspicious. When he arrived at his uncle's apartment, he was relieved to find him home. He told his uncle everything, from his initial hesitation to the murders in the alley. His uncle listened intently, his face grim. "You're in a dangerous game, Kevin," he said. "These people don't mess around." "I know," Kevin said, "but I can't just let this go. I have to do something." His uncle nodded. "I can help you, but you have to be careful. These people won't hesitate to hurt you or anyone you care about." Kevin nodded, his heart racing. He knew that he was in for a fight, but he was determined to see it through. As they made a plan, Kevin's phone rang. It was Theodore. "Where are you, Kevin?" Theodore's voice was low and menacing. "I'm not coming back, Theodore," Kevin said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm done playing the game." "You don't get to walk away that easily, Kevin," Theodore said. "You owe us, and we always collect our debts." Kevin's heart raced as he hung up the phone. He knew that he was in even more danger now, but he was determined to see this through. As he and his uncle made their way through the city, Kevin couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. He kept glancing over his shoulder, but he didn't see anyone suspicious. Suddenly, a car screeched to a halt beside them, and two men jumped out. Kevin's uncle pulled out his gun, and they exchanged fire. The sound of gunshots filled the air as Kevin ducked behind a nearby car. He could hear his uncle's voice shouting for him to run. But Kevin couldn't leave his uncle behind. He peeked out from behind the car and saw that one of the men had his uncle in a chokehold. Without thinking, Kevin charged towards them, grabbing a nearby pipe to use as a weapon. He swung the pipe with all his might, hitting one of the men in the head and knocking him out. He turned to face the other man, who had his uncle in a headlock. Kevin swung the pipe again, this time hitting the man in the side of the head. The man let out a scream as he fell to the ground. Kevin's uncle was free, but he had been wounded in the scuffle. They quickly got into their car and sped away, Kevin's heart racing with adrenaline. They drove to a nearby hospital where Kevin's uncle received treatment for his wounds. As they sat in the waiting room, Kevin couldn't shake the feeling that they were still in danger. But for the first time in a long time, Kevin felt a sense of hope. He had escaped from the dangerous game he had been playing, and he had even managed to save his uncle's life. As they left the hospital, Kevin knew that he still had a lot of work to do. He had to make things right, to turn himself in and face the consequences of his actions. But for now, he was just grateful to be alive, and he knew that he would never play the game again. After leaving the hospital, Kevin got a good night's sleep, but when he woke up the next morning, he was determined to leave the game. He tried to quit, but the game wouldn't let him without a fight. He was in too deep and had too much information that could put him and his loved ones in danger. Kevin realized that he couldn't just walk away from the game. As he tried to figure out what to do next, he received a message from the game's leader, a powerful Gen named Loki. Loki had heard about Kevin's attempts to quit the game and wanted to meet with him in person. Kevin was hesitant, but knew that he had no choice. He agreed to meet with Loki at a cafe in the city. As he approached the cafe, Kevin couldn't help but feel nervous. He had heard stories about Loki, about how she was ruthless and didn't tolerate anyone who crossed her. When he arrived at the cafe, Loki was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. She was beautiful, with long black hair and piercing green eyes, but Kevin knew that looks could be deceiving. He took a deep breath and approached her table. "Kevin," Loki said, her voice smooth and confident. "I've heard that you're trying to leave the game." Kevin nodded, his heart racing. "Yes, I am. I can't do this anymore. I want out." Loki smiled, but there was a coldness in her eyes that made Kevin shiver. "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Kevin. You're in too deep now. You know too much." "What do you want from me?" Kevin asked, his voice shaking. Loki leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "I want you to continue playing the game, and if you don't, I'll make sure that everyone you care about suffers the consequences." Kevin felt his blood run cold. He had no choice but to keep playing the game, but he knew that he couldn't do it alone. He needed help. As he left the cafe, Kevin made a decision. He would find a way to take down Loki and the game once and for all. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to see it through. Kevin reached out to his uncle, who had connections in the law enforcement community. Together, they started investigating the game, trying to find a way to bring it down. It wasn't easy. The game was heavily protected, and Loki was always one step ahead of them. But Kevin and his uncle were determined to keep going. As they dug deeper, they discovered that the game was involved in all sorts of illegal activities, from drug trafficking to human trafficking. They also discovered that Loki was not who she appeared to be. She was not a Gen, but a human who had been manipulating the game from behind the scenes. With this information, Kevin and his uncle were able to build a case against the game. They worked with law enforcement to bring down the game's leaders, including Loki, who was arrested and charged with multiple crimes. Kevin couldn't believe it. He had finally brought down the dangerous game that had almost destroyed his life. He felt a sense of relief and satisfaction. As he walked away from the courthouse, Kevin knew that he had learned a valuable lesson. Success wasn't just about playing the game. It was about doing what was right, even when it was hard. And he knew that he would never forget that lesson again.
Thank you for listening to today's story. If you liked this story and would like to hear more, and/or you would have liked the story to turn out differently, or maybe have an idea for a spin-off to this story or another one altogether, just let us know in the comments below. There will be more stories to come shortly. As always, thank you for visiting my channel. You are all very appreciated.